This is Global Abundance Organization Television, GAO TV. And today we have Guy Morris with us. And I have a little introduction for him is Guy, your thrillers boldly confront governments, corruptions, intelligence agencies, secrets, and political manipulation. What has been your most shocking discovery during your research?
Oh my gosh, that's let me provide you, hopefully your audience, with a little bit of context.
Yeah.
I retired out of 40 years working with major oil and gas, major industrial oil and gas at an international level, companies like IBM, Oracle, Microsoft, and I've worked with a number of different types of technologies that have built the world we have today, including early stages, not the most recent one, early stages of what we now call artificial intelligence. And in 2020, when I retired, I've become aware of so many different things happening on the world. My training was as an economist, as a strategist. I had an MBA. I had an undergraduate in science, computer science, and so I built complex models, even one that outperformed the Federal Reserve and changed how we build economic models to this day. And so I was always taught, my job was to help corporations and CXOs and senior executives to think in terms of long-term strategies and how to connect the dots between multiple things going on at once and what that might mean to the business. When I retired, a part of me wanted to be able to talk about some of those key experiences along the way and some of my conclusions that connect our rapid move towards artificial intelligence, machine intelligence, connected technologies, with a change in collapsing, in some senses, of our current geopolitical system that could be okay, but could go really wrong, and how all of that connects to multiple different cultures of prophecies. The Yuga prophecies in Hindu, the Christian prophecies and the Judeo-Christian prophecies, and there's a I'm able to discard some of the religious overtones to that conversation by having a artificial intelligence decode those prophecies in the same way an AI would, not with religious rituals or histories, but with correlating actual attributes, things that are supposed to be an outcome with things that actually have occurred, developing correlations, calculating probabilities, and building regressions. I know because those are the kinds of models I would build with economic models, and I actually built a prophetic model similar to that. And so it allows me to look at some of how what's going on ties into a conclusion that we sometimes interpret these prophecies as a way of saying a deity will come and judge humanity, when we should be thinking in terms of interpreting as a warning of how humanity might be destroying itself. And those are things that we can apply to our time. Those are things that we can apply both at a macro level, in terms of how we see the world, and but most importantly, and through the characters, we learn to apply it to how, okay, if this is what's going on, how do we respond? How do we respond in a way that has integrity, that has truth, that has balance and insights between needs of the world and somehow a inner and a spiritual need? And how do we respond in a way that's consistent with our being human to each other? And so it allows me to explore multiple layers of the world going on through the guise of a thriller series, um, that has a lot of heart and a lot of provocative thoughts that I try to make you go through. What's most interesting is that the series was inspired by a true story. I know it's a true story because I was part of that story. In the late 90s, a spy program escaped the NSA spy labs and was never recaptured. The program wasn't lost, stolen, or broken. This is a program. The program escaped. That implied a level of intelligence. That implied a number of different capabilities. And being the really nerdy, obsessive single dad that I was at the time, I took it on myself to try and figure out what that meant, if it meant anything at all. With my made up, with I thought was researched concepts, but I couldn't prove anything. I went to a friend and we produced a very popular webisode series called Cracks in the Web that won a number of awards and was a fan. One of our fans was from the US NASA Space Agency. We were optioned by a film studio for the story when the FBI showed up at my house, very, very upset that I knew about their top secret program, although they would never admit that directly, that I was talking about their top secret program, or they would never admit that directly. And what bothered them the most was at that point, my response was not fear. I was obnoxiously giddy because they had just validated my research. Um, so they didn't expect my snarkiness. It was a great night for me, a disappointing night for them, but they went to the studio and they killed the deal. So they got that, they got me in the end. Um, but that was the inspiration that program became one of the featured characters, or the featured AI character that goes throughout the series. And through that program, we're allowed to see the changes in AI technologies as it evolves and it gets used in different ways in technology and in space and in espionage and war systems and all kinds of different ways. Connecting it with sort of the geopolitical issues such as the Great Reset and the Ukraine war and the Gaza war and the U.S. Recent elections, and what might be going on with China and Taiwan, and kind of can start connecting these threads into the tense world that we're living in. And through that, then we can connect other spiritual themes, like the Kali Yuga. In one story, we talk about the image of the beast and how that reflects the global technical system that actually reflects our actual society from cradle to grave. And that's the reflection of us, the beast systems that are so interconnected. Um, and so we start to kind of tie in some of these spiritual themes and how we respond to it, and do it in, rather than a overtone of evangelizing one over the other. We're trying to do it in a search for our humanity in this coming chaos that we see coming. And of course, our heroes survive, but we deal with some subject issues. My latest book, The Image, is the most exciting, and it was my most challenging.
Wow, I mean, one thing. I mean, I wanted to. I'm 4 years in tech world, and not only simple tech world. You've been leading uh, the big giants in the tech industry, and you've been one of the founders of AI too. AI is already there. Artificial general intelligence is gonna come very soon. It's gonna be here any minute. And again, artificial smart intelligence will be taking over. Not this will not take very longer. Taking this in context, I mean, can you just forecast the political canvas of the world? What, how it gonna be? How gonna be the governments? How's the future of normal person?
Well, I try not to do too hard to predict the future. That can be that can be very tricky. What I try to predict is what I think might be the near term future. What are already the stacks that already seem to be in place to happen, and those are a little easier both as a business person to kind of model. If I were building economics beyond that time frame, it would be difficult. But there's also a technological event horizon that we're approaching with AI, that the technology is advancing rapidly enough that we're not sure yet how it will affect governments, elections, education, social media, banking, over roughly maybe even 3 years out. And so there's a lot to there's a lot of reason why I'm projecting forward what because of my experience in the lab and knowing how long it takes something in the lab to get to be commercial, and then how roughly how far ahead the governments are from the commercial field in terms of this technology, and then having spent some time trying to get my head. Let me put it this way: after I discovered that one program had escaped, and a rough reason why they would want it to. For years afterwards, I became obsessed with trying to figure out how else would the government be using other advanced technologies we were building and selling into the commercial sector. And so it started me researching and asking questions and doing hypotheses. And so from that point on, I've figured that the government is probably about 10 years ahead of the laboratory, or roughly 5 years ahead of the commercial sector. That's a lot. When it comes to AI, that's dramatic. And so some of what I'm doing is based on very hard research. Some of what I'm doing is based on projections of those research, based on my own experience about how much they'll be able to use it and what they might use it for. And so far, I've been extremely accurate. And some people say that's uncanny. And I say, no, that's just 40 years of listening to tech talk and trying to translate that to executives and customers. So,
Thank you, Guy. Guy, you've had a Renaissance style career from economics to AI to Disney story writing to
oh,
award winning thrillers. What internal mindset has guided you through such massive reinvention?
um, the one that guided me for the longest time, because I had a very difficult childhood, was never let my past define my future. That my future, I could dream about my future regardless of how bad the past was, and I couldn't undo the past, but I could change who I was today and maybe tomorrow and maybe the day after that to reach a goal. And there was a point in time when I was given the heavenly gift of the chance of going to college after being homeless at age 13 and a runaway at age 15. And for me, it was a God given gift to change my stars, to change my destiny. And ever since, I have felt it an obligation to use that to the best of my ability to explore the breadth of the things I could learn. Once you start to love to learn, it's an unquenchable thirst. And when I went to college, I was inspired by men of the Renaissance who were great at art and great at architecture, and they created new inventions and weapons, and they wrote about governments and religion. And they were men that tried to look at all the elements of life and figure out how they balance together, how they connect together. And I think that was an inspiration for me. So my career, I went from different industries, but I was always trying to look for those problems that others had failed at doing, and I wanted to see if I could succeed at and learn something from and then move on. And so it allowed me to explore a number of different things. And now that I'm retired, it's I get to do whatever I want, explore whatever I want. It's I get to research. All of my books take 2 to 3. All of my espionage books, AI espionage books, have taken to somewhere between 2 and 3 years of research cumulative to get to the end story. My other book, the first book I wrote, The Curse of Cortez, which is independent, that was on a book trip, which is U.S. Barnes and Noble favorite 25 books of 2021. They called it Indiana Jones meets Da Vinci Code, but that one took me 12 years because I wanted to solve a real historical mystery, and it was on and off with my career, and I had to go down a lot of dead ends and rabbit holes before I connected the dots. So, but that was a real journey. So all of my books require research, and that research is what that discovery, that sense of finding something I didn't know and figuring out how does that project forward into a coherent narrative and what it might mean, and things that I never would have imagined, things I've discovered by accident. um, uh, I think that's what excites me. That's the part of the process I love the most.
Amazing, amazing. Can you share a defining moment where you chose purpose over comfort?
Say again.
Choosing purpose over comfort.
uh, I was in my late 50s and I had been working 80-hour weeks, almost 6 7 days a week for decades, and I was always going after these, very super challenging, high pressure jobs where, guy, you got the job, but realize if you fail, it's a career move, right? And doing that for over and over and over again, and not understanding quite why I was always driven to those high anxiety, must prove myself kind of and I didn't really want to be the CXO. I didn't want to do the politics. Hated all of that BS. I'm a that practical guy. But in my late 50s, I was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress, yeah, from my rather turbulent childhood. And it explained years of where I was on and off trying to struggle with different types of addiction, including workaholic. I had hyper anxieties and bouts of chronic depression, and it explained night terrors, and it explained a lot of the things that, one of the reasons I worked so long hours is because I didn't really want to go to sleep because there was never a good experience anyway. And so I learned to work on very, very few hours of sleep for years. And it explained a lot of things. But it caused me, that was one of the things that was one of the pivot points. And then there was a second pivot point, was when I realized that I can develop a computer regression model, as I mentioned earlier, that could, in my mind at the time, if I could correlate different attributes and probabilities, I could disprove most prophecies as mythic, as just mythical, right? Remembering something from the past and maybe projecting it forward or something. And I found kind of the opposite. I found an incredibly high correlations across multiple cultural traditions, um, that had probabilities. In some cases, they were what I call binary probabilities. Yes, it could be that way, or it couldn't. It's been a common experience through man. That's not necessarily prophetic. If you look at that, we just have to discount. We can say, yeah, it exists right now, but no, it doesn't mean much. But there were a surprising number of events that were more singular in all of human history. And those took probabilities to very remote levels. And I think that caused me to start rethinking about the world in different ways rather than career and wealth and prestige that was driving me into, that was burning me out anyway. Um, how much was enough? What were my real values? Was it family? Was it all that work? And I loved the work. I loved working around geniuses and other people that were just incredibly, incredibly brilliant. Um, but I felt that I started connecting that there was more, and I didn't. I wanted to move back before I burned out for good, and so it was a choice that I had. I had enough. I wasn't. I didn't need to have more, and I could. My wife still works, but we live nice in a nice neighborhood, and none of us are hurting, and we're not unhealthy, and we're blessed. But there's a larger perspective because I'm trained to see these larger dots connecting. That's my training. That's my gift. Um, I didn't want to communicate. I could communicate that in a nonfiction way. It would come across as very um, academic and almost maybe judgmental and just critical. And um, it and it would only the guys who would get it would only be geeks like me, economists like me. I wanted to reach a broader audience. I wanted to, and I could do that through a narrative. Just as Michael Crichton, who wrote Jurassic Park, was a medical doctor who was concerned with DNA manipulations and cloning and thought that this could, given the unethical nature of humanity, this could turn out badly. And so he wrote Jurassic Park. They made too many of them, but we got the point. For me, this is my Jurassic Park. This is to say, the technology is neither evil nor it's benign, but it is trained to reflect us, and how it will reflect us first is in who uses it and why. And that's where we're creating an incredibly powerful technology, unlike any we've ever created. And there's three reasons I say that. And we're doing it at a time when autocrats and oligarchs are rising to power, which could create a huge global displacement of jobs, could put downward pressure on the jobs that are remaining, and could create a techno oligarchy feudalism that our grandchildren might inherit. And those are the things I'm concerned with. It's the larger global, larger picture issues that I've been trained to recognize. But if I put it in the frame of um, an Indiana Jones meets a James Bond type of thriller, or Dan Brown type of thriller, I'll gain a bigger audience and more people will connect it. They'll start to see these things and people will research the details and they'll go into what's factual and what's fictional. And it creates a narrative and it gets people to think about these provocative issues.
Really, really insightful. Your books explore deep themes from biblical prophecy to artificial intelligence and geopolitical conspiracy. What sparked this fusion of tech and ancient secrets?
What sparked the tech and ancient secrets? I think as an author, I'm tempted to combine the things that interest me. But I think that there's a more subtle message there, and I think one of the reasons they both interest me is I think that there's a sense that we're kind of somehow repeating ourselves, that maybe we keep changing layers and we do it with more sophistication, but these are kind of principles that we've learned in the past, and somehow the tech, even it doesn't matter how sophisticated the technology becomes, it's the message of who we are that will define whether we succeed or fail with it. And so I'm trying to connect that lesson from our past, that we've had amazingly great empires in the past, and we've seen them all crumble. We've seen amazingly great empires that become corrupt and evil instead of being the universal origins of good and prosperity for everyone. We've seen we've seen the good and the darkness of humanity, and with artificial intelligence, we're accelerating that next curve to a technical kind of model. And I'm trying to help people to be conscious of it somehow, even if it's subconsciously through the narrative, and to start thinking about how do they prepare? What does that mean to them career wise? What does it mean to them physically? What does it mean to them spiritually? Without telling them what to believe, I'm just trying to raise the universal awareness of a direction that the, the direction of humanity it looks like it's taking. And it might be a little on the dystopic side from that sense, but if I look honestly at the geopolitical economics, There's resources like Peter Zehan, who's a geoeconomics. He looks at things going on in India, China, the U.S., all over the world. We look at the climate change issues. If we look at population and aging issues on the economy, banking and national debt issues, these are all issues that work together. They're not one of them on themselves couldn't collapse the system, but if several of them start to break down, and which another world war could do, that could collapse the whole system. And so part of me is trying to do what the James Bond movies did in the 60s and 70s for me, which is I knew that yes, there was the Russians had bombs and we had bombs, but whew, James Bond saved the day for now, and I can, I can, for at least for that Saturday afternoon movie, I can feel good, right? And go to school the next week and be cool, like okay, we saved the day. It's okay. Bond is out there somewhere, and there's a part of me that wants to give this generation a way of having the same, but characters, my main character refuses to kill anybody. He refuses to carry a gun, even though he's a wanted man from all over the nation, because he just doesn't. He believes that it's better to outsmart, to disguise, to hide, to do whatever he can, to maybe if he has to, but death is absolutely the only last resort, and only if it's worth the life of somebody he loves. And so he's the counter bond. He's the anti bond in that sense. And so he's using more AI. He's using technology. He's using high gadgets. He's using electronics. He's using all of the electronic systems to basically create deception that allows him to do that. But he's anti-violent.
Great guy. Thank you. What role do you believe AI plays in shaping or unraveling the future of democracy?
It depends on who uses it. That's the problem. AI could be a major boost to democracy if we were to um, get the right legislation, create the right controls and boundaries, create the right legal consequences and legal accountabilities, whether they're onshore or offshore. Whether we created the internal tools in order to do what we know to do, we could use AI to more quickly flag and stop fraudulent content, misinformation. We could use that. We could use AI to track down the people and the sources of posting that content. We could use AI to do a better job at counting ballots and giving us information quicker. We could use AI to do a lot of good things. I'm actually a proponent of AI. And one of the things I tell young people is to embrace the technology. I write about all of the global macro issues, the things that could go wrong, but those are at levels that are above somebody trying to have a career. And so for people who really love their jobs, I tell everybody this is going to be just like when nobody had a computer on their desk in the 1970s, and then by the mid 80s, everybody had to be able to work a computer, and that meant we reduced the workforce by a third in order because that they couldn't or wouldn't adapt to the computer age. And so no matter what you want to do, I am tell people that AI is neither evil nor benign. There's going to be some great tools. You're going to use them to be more productive. Embrace it. Become the guru. Become the person who can teach others. Make yourself more productive than anybody else. And that will be the way for you to ensure a path within the career of your choice. That said, the global issues do exist because not the technology, it's the who has the power and the money and the intent to use it. So AI could be used for mass misinformation, deep fake videos, deep fake emails, fraudulent campaigns, fraudulent news. I explore some of those possibilities in the novels of what could happen, how they could influence a closed election. Deep fake could be used to launder money, or AI could be used in technologies could be used to launder money and covering it up. So we've got technologies. There's multiple applications called Fraud GPT, Worm GPT, um, um, Darkbird that are actually designed to create fraudulent AI campaigns. And so the tools are there, and so they could be used against us if we put the resources to fight against them, and if we work internationally to kind of close those gaps, we have a chance. Right now, we don't see that international cooperation, and right now the U.S. is stepping backwards rather than forwards, and so that's going to hurt everybody. And so we're not in a good position for that, but it absolutely is possible.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Guy, my organization name is Global Abundance Organization. What I keep reaching people like yourself. I mean, you are a person of huge, big stature. You've seen the world. You not only seen, you've created it. And I mean, coming like a kid of 13 and then 15, I mean, running out of the home, and then you've created your own reality. You are what you have created. I mean, you've done amazing. I mean, even with those kids having all blessings and everything, they can't reach to your level. I mean, I mean, you survive in the industry for 40 years, and then very gracefully you're retired. I mean, you retired by yourself. I mean, if you want, you can keep researching. No, nobody stops you, and you keep doing. I understand. But then this is your payback, and that's what you're doing. And I am educating everything against wars. I am talking to all nationals. Even if I'm working in my own region, coming from Pakistan. I'm keeping talking to people in India and
Mhm.
asking them, do you want war? I mean, do you want to be spent? Do you want your money to be spent on killing other kids? I mean, bullets, bombs, and so. Or no, nobody is for wars. Even I keep talking people in US. None. I have not seen a single person who says, "Okay, spend my money on bullets to killing others' kids." No, none. And why then
Absolutely.
there war? I mean, what? What? I mean, please do advise me to correct my direction and how can I benefit from AI and your experience?
I think you can benefit from AI from you can start to use it first off if there are tools there. Think about AI as a new type of computing that can replicate language, it can replicate visuals, it can replicate voices, it can do productions. It doesn't have the memory to really produce a full like film or a full like commercial, but it's still in very early development. It'll come out and deploy quickly, but think of it as for every organization needs marketing, they need promotion, they need communications, they need representation. We're on video, there's YouTube, there's all these other channels. Producing those, coming up with creative images or imaginary images or just example images. It doesn't have to be real people. If you don't, if you're a production house, if you've got to get somebody else to do it, that's very expensive. So it helps lower the cost of doing more things. So for small businesses, think of all the things that it takes a small business or a small mission or a small operation or a small charity, all of those things to do. And there could be AI tools to help you do it more productively, which means that you get your resources to be more to get more done, and that leaving them time for other more important things as well, and to get more done or even produce more. And so it can help by helping you do more with less. That's a good thing for everybody, and that's a good thing. The other thing is to just be aware of where the dangers are. Just be aware of how to use it appropriate, how to use it safely. One of the things I tell people is to understand that AI has a number of problems, and I talk about these problems in my books in a creative way. One of them is called hallucinations. A hallucination, per a large language model and other models, is simply the AI's is telling you, giving you a response to your query, and is giving you a very good sounding response, but some of the facts are probably most likely completely made up. And so um, it takes someone to edit what it's saying to saying, okay, is did that treaty in really exist, or does that law really exist, or whatever those facts are. It doesn't matter. It does require a little bit of a fact checker, right? Because the model at this stage, and this is where I talk about how these were changed. I actually have a new book that I'm working on called Humanity and the AI Tsunami, a survival guide. And I'm looking to, as a really simplified version of what the technology is, the different types or forms of the technology, what are some of the key risks involved, where the technology is likely to go over the next few years, the impacts on the sort of a utopian perspective of it, and then a more realistic, what if things go wrong perspective. And then what are the things you can do to prepare? Now, as I said, one of the things you can do is embrace the technology. Don't be afraid of it. It's just tech. How it will be used at the macro geopolitical global systems, control systems, um, that's where it will have its damage, right? It's in displacing jobs. Um, and it'll be in creating lethal weapons that don't require humans to intervene. It'll be in taking over and changing the banking systems to give them more control over who spends what where. It'll be in surveillance and intelligence, just like China has a tight intelligence system, so much so that if you get a phone call, if you answer a phone call from somebody in one of your friends who's rated at a lower social score than you, that could lower your social score to theirs. And everything, your credit, your ability to get apartment, everything is based on this. Are you a good enough citizen score? And so it's a connected systems of cameras and monitoring social and phones and everything, and that's all managed in the back by artificial intelligence. And so that's the dystopic end of where we're at even today. So that's why I'm trying to tell people who we have running our governments right now is absolutely critical to those are the people who are aware of what's going on and committed to protecting consumer safety and consumer jobs. And otherwise, it's going to be a very chaotic transition. And so I'm trying to, these are all dots that connect. And unfortunately, I have this, I have this very uh, uh, frustrating mind that does not like that won't shut off until it wants to shut off, and it doesn't matter what time of the morning it is. I can't go to sleep until it shuts off, and so I have to wait for it to shut off, and sometimes it just doesn't like to. I tell my wife that if I were a movie, I would be that guy with weird frizzy hair that looked like he hasn't changed clothes in a week in the middle of a basement with a big giant chalkboard saying, "Put the food under the door."
That's wonderful. Okay, okay, you said retirement is a retirement of research. How do your books reflect your pursuit of wisdom and meaning?
um, my books reflect, I think, the process I did in terms of really coming to terms with what the real world was, realizing that the enemies I thought were the enemies were not the enemies, and that the real enemies were basically kind of hidden in plain sight, and that things I thought were valuable that had cost relationships could cost relationships unless I'm willing to change. So it looks at people who are traumatized and how they get past that to have productive lives. And how do you make the right choice in the middle of um, unimaginable obstacles? And because now mine are fictitious obstacles, but they're based. Many of the obstacles are based on things that are coming that are real, and I might take it to the extreme of life and death scenarios. But we're all going to be facing similar versions of these. So I think it's my way of trying to process, the process this in a productive way, in a positive way, that captures both, that doesn't downplay the risks, the authentic nature of the risks, but doesn't succumb to the idea that I'm a victim. It can encourage the idea that I have choices, that I might bear the consequence. If I make bad ones, I'm going to bear the consequences of them, and so my characters make bad choices. But that's part of learning how to make better choices, and hopefully bear the good consequences of those. And so I think I'm trying to create the non superhero characters who are just caught up, who are just super skilled in certain ways, and a, a little bit on the off the radar kind of lifestyle. And they're kind of caught up in the conflict between governments and between religions and between all of these conflicts. And somehow this AI that escaped the NSA seems to pull them through these things, because and we don't realize this until, we don't realize why until later. And I don't want to I almost said it, I don't want to say it, don't want to do a spoiler, but there's a purpose, that the reason why the AI is almost using these individuals for a reason only the AI knows at this point.
I mean, this is very fearing. What message do you hope young readers and aspiring writers take from your stories?
I think there's three things that I would, two to three maybe, that I would maybe say. One is, never let your past define your future. Um, you can take that any way you want. I had a difficult, dark past. I decided that I didn't want that to be who I was, and even when I failed at doing it, I got up and just said, "Well, that's just part of my past. I'm never going to let my past define my future," and I just kept going. And the other thing is that sometimes in life, and this is going to be a little harder one to understand until maybe you're a little older, is that sometimes we have to learn how to die before we can learn how to live. And that applies on so many physical, economic, career, life, relationship, and spiritual choices, in terms of, sometimes we have to fail and give something up before we find something that we're really meant to be. We find our true purpose. And for me, it was not easy to give up a successful career. I was a director at Microsoft. And when I, even after I left them for a little while, I went back as a consultant. I was still getting paid six figures. And But at a certain point in time, I realized I had spent close to 40 years making other people extremely wealthy and solving their problems and working my fanny off. And at a certain point in time, none of it was anything that would matter, anything as a legacy or something I could leave behind to my children or grandchildren. No thoughts, no wisdom. It was, I had just basically put myself into a servitude mode, and I'd reached the point where I didn't have to. And I think realizing my medical condition, that I needed to reduce my stress levels and reprioritize what was important for me. But the fact is, you never need to let that define you. And I think the third thing is, don't let anybody else's expectations hold you back. When I first started in life, I was a homeless street kid trying to go to college. Everybody told me I'd fail. When I graduated college with 3 degrees, full-time scholarship to grad school, accepted into the Harvard MBA program, and an intern at IBM without even interviewing, everyone told me I wasn't meant for leadership. It, I grew up being told I would fail, and there maybe that was the part of me that said, you know, I'll show you. And you have to go through life with a little bit of, well, I'll show you. And it's not a bad attitude if you're willing to put in the hard work, the perseverance, the sweat, the determination, and put up with the mouthing off of others that it will take in order for you to push through the obstacles to actually succeed. And there will be obstacles. And you won't succeed unless you're willing to do the extra work to push through them, especially depending upon where you're starting in life, as then depending upon where you want to go. For me, I had to make personal choices along the way of where I would not cross my ethical lines and where I would choose to live with less, to give up a job, to give up a promotion, to give something up or walk away from something because it crossed an ethical or spiritual line for me. And I chose to I chose that as what was more important in the long run. And I know many of my colleagues and many of my friends made different choices, and they are extremely successful today, and good for them. I had to make my own choices, and you need to know that you're empowered to make your choices. You don't have to you don't have to work the 80-hour weeks if you don't want to. You can make your choices, but you'll have to just be honest with yourself about the options and the opportunities that each choice and the goods and pros and cons for each choice.
Great guy. You worked with Disney record and written your own album. A rare mix with your tech and writing background. What
Oh,
team?
you pulled that one from ancient history, didn't you?
I- what themes did you explore through music that couldn't you couldn't through novels?
Oh, well, first off, I wanted to be a musician when I ran away from home at 15. I wasn't good enough. I don't if I'm honest with myself, I never was hit material, but I was a good songwriter because I had a way with words and to look at things and had a few minor hits, co-wrote a couple minor things. And um, thankful that I was directed to go to college. It gave me a solid career, allowed me to raise a family. All of that was good. But a friend of mine came to me one day and said, and most of my songs were just for myself, for my family, or for my church. I wrote songs for my church. And he came to me and he said, "Hey, Guy, I'm working on a project for Nickelodeon TV, like music videos for kids. Would you write me some songs and I'll pay for you to go in the studio. We'll record the songs. I want to do them as a demo." And so I said, sure. He was a good friend, and so I did. And we recorded recorded 5 songs in like a 14-hour day. It was a really long day, and I didn't hear back from him on the project, so I figured he never got it funded. And about 6 months later, I got called from, I want to say Harold Ramis or Harold Reynolds or something like that, from Disney Records, wanted to talk to me about my CD that I submitted to him. Not CD, cassette, my cassette that I submitted to him. And I said, and I thought, well, this is a joke. I never submitted as a cassette. I don't do that. I got a career. I'm really busy. I know it wasn't me because I never sent it to anybody. And he said, well, I'm looking at your name, Guy Morris, right here. And I said, really? I said, maybe it's another Guy Morris. You sure you got the right number? He said, your number's on it. I said, really? And he said, yeah. And then he's saying, and then he gave me the names of the songs, and I thought, I know who sent that to you. So it was my friend when he couldn't send it to when he couldn't sell it to Nickelodeon, he sent it to Disney. And so they wanted me to work on a couple of projects, and the way they worked is I would give them songs. They would decide if they wanted to contract the song. There was a standard contract per song, and if I recorded 5 songs and they didn't like any of them, that was just my tough luck. But they wanted a couple of the existing songs, then they wanted me to work on a new project, and that led to 3 or 4 projects. And at one point in time, And there, this was Disney Records. It wasn't for the movies, which is the Disney films. This was, they'll take the film franchise, right? So it might be Little Mermaid, and they'll create a Little Mermaid doll, and then they'll get all kinds of new, not the movie ones because those are higher royalty. The new some new Little Mermaid oriented songs, and put it with a cassette with the toy, and they would sell that at Disneyland. And so these songs might sell 500,000 copies just because they were at Disneyland. So I said yes. I worked on several projects. And then one project, I wrote a song, and they wanted two songs, but on one song, they didn't like one line. And the producer decided that he would send his girlfriend to my house to help me rewrite that one line. By the time she was there, I had already rewritten the line, but she got half of my royalties, and because it was the producer's girlfriend. And so that was one of my ethical red lines. So that was the last project I worked on.
Oh, great. Guy, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being with us on the Abundance Show today. Your journey from exclusive leadership and songwriting to award-winning thrillers and non-profit work is nothing short of extraordinary. You've shown us how intellect, faith, and storytelling can come together to create real impact, whether through written word, music, or service to those in need. On behalf of myself, our team, and entire global community, thank you for inspiring us to live more consciously, create more boldly, and give more abundantly. We are honored to walk a little part of your journey with you today, wishing you continued success, purpose, and power as you light the way forward. Guy, thank you so much. There have been a lot left. I mean, I want to talk about the cancer underserved communities that you've been working for children, and and especially your role in politics, economics, and although you are known for tech, I mean, you've been working for IBM and Oracle's and the big, huge companies. But I mean, I want to more explore your songwriting, the singer within you. I want to hold a complete show when you're singing. I mean, singing your own song. And I want to end this show on a song. If you want to sing for us, for your one
Oh,
of your.
I don't sing anymore. But I tell you what, email me. You have my email, and I'll send you a link to some of my songs which are on Bandcamp.
Okay, if you don't sing, I mean, you can recite. I mean, get us some verses of your song, some written songs, so that I mean we end the show boldly and very clearly and in a message.
Okay, I'll give you the lyric of one song that came from a moment when I had gone to college and I had started a good career, and I thought I wanted to still be in the songwriting business. And I drove 2 hours to pitch to a producer in Hollywood, and he listened to 5 seconds of the song and stopped and said no. And I had to go away. And when I got to my car wouldn't start. And so I was stuck 2 hours from home at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I only had a few dollars in my pocket, and I my credit card was near its max. My wife wasn't going to come get me, and so I walked the streets of Hollywood all night. And at one point, I went into a diner just to get a cup of coffee to help me stay up, and used that as a way of just watching the actions of a less affluent, grungier part of Hollywood throughout all the night. And the opening lyrics of one of the songs became, "Out of the dirtied window of an all night diner, into the heat of a summer night, onto a street that was littered with hearts embittered by the struggles for love and for life. I see a graying old woman desperately hold on, her hopes, what's left of her hopes and her dreams. Walk by the girls at the corner. Forgot the lyrics. The corner.
This is too touching.
Um, yeah, it's been so many. I haven't performed in 10 years, so I'm sorry if I couldn't relate it. But as I said, if you'd like, I'll send you a link. That one was called "On the Street," and it was part of my. It was a turning point for me to realize that uh, even though I had escaped that life, and what it turned out to be is I saw somebody at one point in the song, and I talk about it in the song, who who was sitting and begging in a little hovel of a building in between two buildings where I used to sit and beg. And that was a pivotal point in my heart to see myself to say, I've been pulled out, but I'm not above. And I can never forget where I came from. I can never swallow the Kool-Aid that I'm entitled. It's not that I've earned it, I've been blessed into it. But never let my past define my future.
Oh my goodness. Message to the world.
Oh, my message to the world.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's a heavy responsibility. Yeah, we are more than just the physical dimensions that we live in. We can know that both from our spiritual understandings and our scientific ones. While our science is busy trying to understand what it is and how it works, faith, true faith, has quantum elements that cross dimensions, and it helps us. We're trying to understand the who's and the whys, and they both connect in the unknown that none of us can prove, but we know it's there. When the world gets difficult, one of the things that we have to define is, what does it mean to be abundant? Does it mean that palace? Does it mean the royals? Or does it mean a family that loves each other and laughs? Does it mean enough food on the table so that everybody's full at the end of the day? Does it mean living someplace, even if it's simple, but living in peace? We get to define for ourselves what that future means. And we have the opportunities with the technologies and AI to do education and finances and banking and digital currencies, all kinds of opportunities for people of all locations and statuses to make something more of themselves if they work hard for it and are focused. Don't give in to the dark side, because there will be a dark side, and AI will carry that dark side because we are dark. No major technology ever created by man for good wasn't also used for evil. And the same will be for AI. Expect it, but don't let it defeat you. You have a choice of becoming somebody that overcomes or somebody that becomes a victim, and that depends on each of us.
Great. This is Guy Morris from US, and special advice for Pakistan. As long as, since your economic, you have an eye on economy all the time, and especially you have interest in politics too. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, anything you want to advise to Pakistan, especially the situation we are going through for 75 years now.
Um, well, we're going to go through a little bit of an economic cage rattling with tariffs driven by no good economic theory or advice. It's just a man who just it's hard to understand the real rationale behind this, other than to shake up the global economy and bully other countries, as far as I'm concerned. That said, that's the reality. And so we're going to live with unstable kind of economy, because trade is a generator, is sort of the heart blood, sort of the flow of the veins of how the world economy works. And so that requires two things. It requires economic, financial stability, and it requires um, peace stability. Both are right now at risk. So I would prepare for being self-sustaining more right now. If it were me, I would prepare for understanding that we may not be thinking in terms of exporting or importing as much, but just making sure, can we grow enough to eat? Do we have enough? Can we take care of our own? Do we have enough resources to internally be okay? And really focus on those internal economies right now. And then just trading and working those things with partners that you continue to trust will be there in the end. And redefining those trusted partners is really important, and we see Canada do it, and redefining and strengthening their alliance with Europe, and I think that's a very, very smart move. I'm very excited for them to do that, because I'm not a fan of what's going on here in America, both from an economic perspective, from a peace perspective, and from a biblical perspective. So the advice I would give is, you know, so I know that there's conflicts with India right now. If those can be resolved peacefully, I think that's in everyone's best interest. Nobody benefits from the economic, or the emotional, or the um, um, social heartache and disruptions of losing family and friends over territory that's, over territory, of over things, when there could be some other way. And I know that there's emotional ties on both sides. America's been involved in wars. I understand the emotions, but I think that peace will lead to more stability, that will lead to better prosperity, that will lead to better outcomes in the long run, will allow for that self-sustaining types of view inward. On a global level, as I said, find partners that can be trusted as things change. Think in terms of the next phase of where these partnerships are going. And partnerships that are regionally close as well could be strong, because those are things that can't be disrupted through disruptions in shipping, for example. Shipping will probably go through some disruptions if China invades Taiwan at any point in time. That's going to be a game changer on multiple levels. If the war in Ukraine erupts into a war in Europe, that's going to be a game changer. If the wars between Israel and Iran erupt, those are game changers. If the U.S. current strategy, budget strategy, drives us to a fiscal cliff with our debt, that 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 could be a game changer within a few years as well.
Thank you so much, and seeing you same soon again. I hope you'll be giving me time, because there are lots of tears I have to go through. Your personality is multidimensional. Thank you so much for giving me time and space in your life.